Opportunity to serve the good people of Levy County. Thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us, and thank you for every blessing that you have bestowed on this school system. We ask for your strength and your wisdom as we make decisions that affect so many lives, and we ask for your guidance in our daily lives so that we may better serve you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. If everybody's had a chance to read over the agenda, do we need to make any changes?
Mr. Chairman.
All right. I will accept the motion to adopt the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we'd like to welcome this exuberant crowd that's here this morning. It's so good to have you with us. Are there any public comments or questions or anything?
No, sir.
And it seems the crowd is quite quiet today, so we'll move on to the first item of business. I would like to invite Ms. Kim Blake up here to get started on this exciting bit of news.
How's your house coming? Is it getting closer?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes, it is.
All right.
We're just glad we got tile.
Yeah. It took a lot of talk about tile, didn't it? Tile was tough, wasn't it?
Kyle,
Picking out tile. It's tough, isn't it?
listen. Don't get me up here and start talking about your business. Don't talk about mine. All right, let's talk about something that is fun. Next year's budget. Excuse me if I cough, I'm getting over a cold and the cough just won't leave me. So you're gonna have two packets, you have my presentation, and then these are the actual documents that we're gonna follow through as I do the presentation.
Cold.
All right, so this is just our budget timeline. Today we'll do the proposed budget and approve the trim ads. And then we'll, on August 3rd at 6 o'clock, we'll adopt the tentative millage and budget in that order. And then on September 9th, we'll adopt the final millage and budget in our final meeting and approve the cost report for 2021 and the annual financial report for 2021. So there's a lot going on in finance in 2 months, so 8 weeks is a lot of work, So the first thing we'll talk about is this sheet you have here, and it's the fourth calculation versus the second calculation. And this is important. The fourth calculation was the one we were held harmless, I think up to the second count. And then we have the third count, we have the fourth calculation. And then the second calculation just came out when the RLE was released. So we're comparing last year's revenues, state revenues and local, to this year's. So what you'll see at the bottom of the first page, you're going to see our net state FEFP decrease is almost 400,000. So that would include any increase, the base student allocation did increase by $53. That's included in that decrease. And then you'll go through and see the change in each categorical. And ultimately, what is driving that decrease is the emergency order funding adjustment of over $500,000 that came in last year. So our hold harmless, that is of course going away. So what would have happened in a normal year if there was no COVID and we had just had that reduction in FTE? In a normal year, we would have lost that $500,000 in our third calculation. So the last 6 months of the year, our revenues would have dipped. So we carried that all the way to the end. Now it's going away. So now we're seeing that $500,000 being backed back out and looking at starting the year without that emergency order. So then on the next page, you'll see total state funding decrease is $932,000. That includes a class size reduction decrease of $533,000, which is painful. So that's resulting in a loss of state funding, FEFP dollars, of $932,000. So the scholarships, they're back on your first page. We estimate the scholarships, so they're listed as part of the categoricals, and they reduce our FEFP funding. So in the third calculation, when it hits, we have the true McKay and Family Empowerment Scholarship numbers. And so the last 6 months of the year were reduced by that figure. So last year, it was a little over $1 million. You can see the breakdown. Almost 400 to McKay, over 600 to Family Empowerment. Family Empowerment is just growing at a large pace. So we're estimating 1.2 for Family Empowerment and McKay for next year, with the majority of that being an increase to Family Empowerment. So that's almost a $200,000 increase in scholarships. I think if we only have a $200,000 increase in scholarships, it will be a good day, but it could be more. So the estimated total state funding decrease is 1.1 million. All right, we're still on, we can go to the next slide, but we're on the second page of your colorful page. So now we're going to talk about the local funding and the impact with the RLE that was presented in the second calculation. So total local funding is going to increase by about $667,000. So we're seeing that increase in the RLE, capital outlay, and discretionary operating, but the $667,000 is just considering the RLE and discretionary operating, because the capital outlay is in its own fund. It doesn't contribute to our day-to-day operations in terms of salaries and those types of things. It's a very targeted fund. So the next one. That takes that 1.1 million and reduces. We're going to start the year out with $450,000 lost in state and local funding. So that's kind of how that works. Anybody have any questions? I tried to make your handout match all of that, so you can flow through that and see where those numbers are coming from. Ms. Boyle? Nope. All right, so we go to next one. Let's talk just a minute about our revenue sources. So that's the first part of your third page. Top part. So we have some federal through state sources. Those are usually Medicare, Medicaid. So this year we're expecting about 76,000 for that. That will also include, I believe, ROTC, money we get back from ROTC is built into there too. Our state sources, which include the FEFP, you can see that 1.1 million. There's other small state things that come through like grants and stuff, so it's not all FEFP, but the majority of that variance is coming from the loss in FEFP. Local sources, you can see an increase of 723,000. That also comes from different things than just our taxes, but the majority of it is coming from our property taxes or RLE. And then interfund transfers. These are things where we pay property and casualty, we pay our debt service. We have to, for accounting purposes, pay it out of the general fund, but we recover it from capital outlay. So those things become what we call interfund transfers. So you're looking at a total loss of revenue of about $376,000, a little over. Anybody, well, here's a graph. So before we get to questions, this just kind of shows you that the majority of our sources, as we know, revenue sources come from state sources, and that's why we're so sensitive to any of those changes in the FEFP monies. 26% local sources, 1% federal through state, and 2% interfund transfers. Anybody have any questions about?
So we're looking at a loss.
So even with a almost a $54 increase in base student allocation, we're still facing somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 when you factor in all of our revenue sources, starting out the year. It could grow, it could decrease. It just depends on what happens in the third calculation, and I'll kind of get to that in a little bit. All right, so we're going to talk a minute about the second part of that sheet you were just looking at. So the revenues are on top, expenditures in the middle, and then our fund balances, of course, at the end. So you can see the change in expenditures from 2021 to 2022. So we're showing a 1% increase in salaries. And I want to say, when you see adjusted for scholarships, so if we go back up to the revenue line real quick, what I mean by that is the way the state requires me to submit my budget, I have to submit full revenues, which would include what we're estimating as a reduction. And then I have to follow up with an expenditure to balance it out. But if I put those into this and give it to you, it really skews it. So I pulled, the revenues are already reduced by 1.2 million to account for the scholarships, and then I pulled it out of the expenditure. If not, it increases our expenditures by 1.2 million, and you're wondering why our salaries grew at that rate, which they didn't. That's just where I have to stick it. Does that make sense? So I've already adjusted for all of that. We're showing a 9% increase in employee benefits. Most of that is coming from an increase in FRS, and then an anticipated increase in insurance. And the way our insurance works, it's a half year. So this year we'll have a full year of last year's increase, plus a half year increase for this year. We're showing a 2% decrease in contracted services and travel. Mostly that's travel. I think that travel is going to ramp back up, but those travel lines were pretty large in this last year's budget. So I tried to balance them out a little bit. We have a 1% increase in energy. The material and supplies, that 58% increase, most of that is where you'll hold roll forward funds. So those funds may not be expended, but they have to sit somewhere in the budget. So right now it's including roll forward for all the schoolhouse budgets. And then of course our textbooks, almost 900,000 is for increased textbooks because we're going to do a full ELA adoption this year. The next is your capital outlay, and that's just computers, equipment, furniture, those kinds of things. And then, of course, other expenditures are shown where our subs sit. Does anybody have any question about those expenditures? And then we take this activity, we come down in the fund balance. The 1920 is real figures, 2021 is estimated, and of course 21-22 is estimated. So what we're estimating in terms of the fund balance, where we may end in 21-22 is with a 17% fund balance. It's projected out quite far, so that could vary. But if that is where we land, I gave you a little breakdown of what that fund balance, because every dollar in that fund balance is not created equally. Some of them you can spend, some of them you can spend only on certain things, and some you can't spend at all. So the restricted 800,000, that's usually tied back to food service inventory. We have assigned, which are things like the schoolhouse, fund balance, those types of assignments. And then we have the unassigned, which would be around 5 million. But we know that we like to hold back 5% for the board. So I go ahead and do the math, pull out 5% and show you what really the unassigned could be at the end of 21-22, which is around 3 million. Again, the closer you get to your projection date, the better your projection is. So I'm projecting out quite far with these numbers. Anybody have any questions? Now, these are just some graphs to go along with the expenditure comparisons we just did for the general fund. just kind of can see, salaries are pretty similar last year to this year. Benefits, of course, that increase. We're flat for purchase services and energy services. Got that jump up in material and supplies, but everything, I do this just to kind of see if anything is jumping out at me. If we have some outliers in there that I need to look at and see if something's carrying over from last year that shouldn't, or I'm projecting something that's not gonna occur. And again, this is the proposed budget, which will be identical to the tentative, so you'll see some changes for the final when we have final numbers and we're able to go in and smooth out some of these areas. And this is just the proposed budget by object. So the one thing to note with our budget is 79% goes to salaries and benefits. And then you can see the breakdown for the others. For the tentative, I'll dig a little deeper into that and kind of show you where it's going by function, how much is going to classroom and ESE and those types of areas. Again, we do this just to see, we usually sit around 80% to salaries and benefits, so you want to do some of this just to see if my budget is reflecting our normal pattern. All right. So now we're going to go to capital outlay. I think the biggest thing to note on here is this is showing under other financing sources at 24 million. That is year 2 and year 3 for our special facilities. Another thing to note is we are, because while we build those 3 years, we have to pay back our 1.5 mil. We budget 1 mil a year. But at the end, we're going to be paying back 4.5 mil. So you can kind of see how big that is and what that means to us. So 1 mil this year is 3.6 million. Of that, I budgeted 2.4 for payback. That leaves us 1.2 million. So the COPS that I was just talking about, the debt service at 667,000. Property and casualty I was just talking about is 280,000. So we've already eroded 950,000 of that 0.5, but we still have maintenance. We still have day-to-day things we need to do. Luckily for us, we do have some other capital from the sales, schools, and properties that we're using to meet that difference. But I want to point that out so you can understand the impact to general fund, because it seems like they're not related, but they are. If we couldn't move that 950 back to general fund, I'd be projecting that fund balance to be $1 million less than it is now, because we'd have to pay it out of general fund. This year, we feel pretty good. Next year, we're concerned, but we're doing different things to offset some of that with our, hopefully with some ESSER funds and stuff to help alleviate some of that impact in year 3. We are grateful for year 2 and year 3 coming in one lump sum. I think that will match the project better. And we're also grateful for the language in statute that allows us to pay back over time. You just must budget up to 1 mil, but you don't want to really stretch that out too far. You want to try and pay that back as quickly as possible.
How much time do they give you, Ms. Kim?
There is no time limit.
What limits if there is a length of time that you have to pay back before you can go back into the hopper if there was ever another special facility project that we would want to go
Take
after?
on it.
Yes.
And that's a good point. You have to build back up your reserves. If we didn't have 6 or 7 million in reserves when we went in, I just showed you what could have happened. Could still possibly happen to our general fund, how quickly it can erode. We also depend on capital outlay for some other transfers to general fund, and we're pushing those back. So you will see that fund balance dwindle somewhat to account for some of those maintenance activities that we now cannot pull from capital to general. But the quicker we can pay it back, I guess we want more pain in a shorter amount of time than pain over a longer amount of time. But we're going to do it in a way that is best for the district. So if it means 1 mil this year, half a mil next year, but we would love to have that paid back within 3 years, within the 3 years, if we can. So this is the debt service. These next two pages are just showing you the debt service payments and what I'm talking about. Now, the first one is the COPS that I was talking about, certificates of participation. This is the one where we pay it out of general fund and move it from capital. And you can see how much we pay next year. The next one is racetrack. It's not an interfund because it gets paid right out of the revenues we receive, and that all flows through debt service, and that's about $212,000. Go to food service. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So food service is unique. It supports itself fully. You can see the revenues, expenditures. One thing though I want to draw your attention to, because it's counter to what you would expect or want to see, but you need to see it, is that large reduction in the fund balance. Food service is only allowed to carry, I believe, 3 months average of revenue in their fund balance. So we've been fighting that for 2 years. It's a good problem to have, but Department of Ag just, there's all these hoops we have to jump through because they want to see that fund balance go down. So it is good news that that fund balance is going from 1.9 to almost 900. We need it to do that. And Miss Julia has some expenditures planned. She's already started reducing that fund balance, but she's got things like ovens, mobile food carts, walk-in coolers, menu monitors, which I think Mr. Bennett's talked about, some food service transportation vehicles, training software, washers, dryers. She's just pulled a lot of stuff down to try to get this fund balance reduced to where Department of Ag requires it to be.
Do they fine you if it's not
So
there?
far, we have not had any sort of a monetary repercussion, but we've been struggling with this for 2 years, so we don't know at what point they're gonna say, well, you're getting too much revenue for this, so we need these items, we just need to go ahead and purchase them and get that fund balance down. I will say too, for the last 2 years, Ms. Julia has contributed to the general fund with, Pam's gonna shoot me because I can't remember the word for it. We're able to take off some overhead costs and move those. This is the first time she's been able to do that in 2 years, because prior to that, or well before her tenure, we were providing money from the general fund to food service. Now you're seeing it come back. She's also hired a maintenance person that she didn't have before, and she's also paying for training from one maintenance employee to her maintenance employee, which is alleviating some of the maintenance budget. So it is exciting to see how food service can work with the other departments and benefit the other departments.
Thank you.
All right, so this budget is definitely going to change when we do the final, because federal just can't catch up. We move at a faster pace than federal moves. So right now, these are the best that we could come up with, and it's just sort of saying basically last year's federal budget is going to be essentially the same to this year's. It's important to note that this is not CARES. It's not ESSER 1, ESSER 2, or ESSER 3. This is just your Title I, Title 5, those types, Title II, our traditional federal budgets. There's never a fund balance because we can only draw down after we expend it. So we front the money, much like the construction, you front the money and then you pull it down. All right, so this is your ESSER 1 that has a gear component, which were funds that the governor scooped off the top and then told us how they could be spent. This does not include ESSER 2. I'm hoping by the final budget we'll have some idea with ESSER 2. They dropped the RFA, or the budget request, I think Tuesday. And then ESSER 3, I'm sure will not impact this budget at all. At least not by the final budget. So again, these numbers are very low. I think it's about, what is it, 6 million roughly with ESSER 2. So.
And what we've done a very good job is trying to move non-reoccurring costs that way it helps alleviate with the general fund costs, like our insurance costs that went up. So our unemployment claims that went up and some that were fraudulent that we've talked about. So our summer program will be coming out of ESSER 2 that we'll discuss a little bit later. So all these things that we've tried to shift these costs to help, knowing that we're headed for a little bit of a cliff in year 2 and year 3 out from now with our general fund, and trying to help alleviate with the costs of the payback for the capital outlay and what we have coming up.
Good point. ESSER 2 is unique. It allowed for some maintenance activities. We've never seen anything like that. So we're going to try to shift some maintenance. It's things like HVAC, doors, windows, things that sort of have a logical connection to COVID. So they aren't necessarily high, they're high dollar maintenance items, but they're not the majority of maintenance budget. But it still will let us use ESSER 2 in a way that benefits all staff, because anything you do to protect the general fund and that fund balance is ultimately better for the staff and the district as a whole.
That's also why the couple positions that you saw, the math and science, and they were limited for 2-year time periods to be in this budget, to come off of the assessor funds instead of being general fund driven. So.
And that fund balance of 730, that is ESSER 1. That's what we haven't spent out of CARES. So the original CARES, that's about what we have. It's not, that's not to say it's not allocated. We just haven't expended it. All right, so now we're going to get into self-insurance. All right, this one's, so bear with me, this was a little fun. Okay, so when we're looking at the revenues, we are showing, let's see, we're staying pretty flat with our revenues for our self-insurance. Those revenues are coming from insurance premiums that we collect from employees, obviously. The majority of that is coming from there. The expenditures, again, are our claims. The majority of that's claims. I believe it's not care here anymore.
My health.
My health, it costs for my health is included in that as well. And would that fall under the purchase services, I believe? Okay. And then you see your claims or your other expenditures. You see a 10% growth in total claims. All right, the bottom fund balance. One thing to keep in mind is we did do those permanent transfers from CARES to offset, what, about 400,000? 400,000 at this point. Okay, so you would see that reflected in, I may not have it on here. We moved it. We moved it as a permanent transfer. So in essence, what it's doing is helping offset that increase in expenditures that we see between 1920 and 2021. So our fund balance right now, we're projecting we'll still have around 2.9. That's important because every February we have to meet with an actuary and we have to have 2.5 months worth of claims in our savings account. Or we have to do those permanent transfers from the general fund we've done before. I think we've done around 300,000 to date, but we haven't had to do it in the last 2 years.
It's been several years.
I budgeted 100,000 to have to move. I budgeted every year because we just don't know. So this budget does have 100,000 built into it for a permanent transfer from general fund to self-insurance, but we're hoping to avoid that. One thing that is concerning is the bottom of, you can see what pre-COVID. So I just looked at May and June. So May and June pre-COVID was about 680,000 in claims. COVID, it was a little over 1 million, 52% increase. We're still in COVID, so I don't want to say post-COVID, but this year's is showing a 5% increase, so 52 plus 5. We're continuing to grow. We want to see a decline begin to occur, and we probably will, but we don't know if we'll get back to pre-COVID. So these increases are going to have to be met one of two ways. They have to either be met with permanent transfers from the general fund, or they have to be met with board dollars, which still comes from the general fund, or they have to be met with increase to employees' monthly contributions. Thank you. Again, that's usually negotiated, but I just want to point that out. I think that our biggest challenge over the next 5 years is the impact of COVID on our self-insurance and that $15 an hour minimum wage. Those are two potentially devastating things that we're having to balance, that are high cost and impact our employees. Believe it or not, the increase in minimum wage impacts our employees two ways. It's good and bad. So I just thought that was huge in just 2 months. Overall, I don't know, do we know roughly?
Not at this point.
So we'll get some of those numbers for you, what the annual increases appear to be. Again, these are just 2 months, the last 2 months of the year. All right, does anybody have any questions before we move on to the ads and?
With the health insurance, all that information that's out there right now, will that make a difference by getting everybody to process what they need to process by August?
Well, that's a separate, that was part of negotiations. We did that in saying that, the more that we can run through the clinic,
Right,
I mean, there's no cost. We're already paying for it, there's no cost.
right,
The problem with the health insurance and the increase, these are COVID,
related,
it's vaccines, it's testing, it's hospital stays, it's physician visits, specialist visits, because of people getting COVID.
right,
And we can't do any, we can't do anything about that at the clinic, we're in line to get COVID vaccines in the clinic, but they're a small group, and so it takes a while. We try to funnel all of that through the health department and the testing because it's free. But once somebody's diagnosed and they're put in the hospital, it's nothing we can do about it.
So that is the last 2 years we've negotiated no increase for employees. The board has supported 100% of the increase the last 2 years for our employees. And we tied that to them getting this health assessment because, I'll let Kaylee go ahead and tell you the benefits.
Well, when you do a blood, as you do your blood draw, they can figure out things ahead of time. So we can try to prevent diabetes or hypertension or high cholesterol or possible heart attacks coming up. So that's why we do that, is to try to identify those problems. So that, and they have found things where people are like, listen, you're pre-diabetic, you need to change your diet, you need to exercise, those kind of things to prevent further major medical bills. Because when someone has a heart attack, which is devastating to them, it's also a $200,000 or $300,000 claim. So we want to prevent that for them too, but, so that's the point of doing that.
That's, I'm thinking, for everybody to be aware of that, so it'll help us on our side
And we try to
to
promote it.
go do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
That was my-
But you can see the challenge it'll be this year to continue that gracious pattern of covering 100%. I'm not saying we are or aren't, I'm just saying this is an issue. COVID, we weren't expecting that when we were doing those negotiations the last 2 years.
Exactly.
But we are appreciative of it for our employees. Okay, so let's talk about trim while we're here, truth and village, because you'll need to approve these ads so that we have to run them for the tentative budget. So this is a copy of our certified taxable value, and we'll kind of walk through that. This is what drives those numbers. Line 1, 2.1 billion is our certified taxable value. Line 16 is our RLE, which is 3.627. Line 17 shows the 1.5 mil we talk about for capital outlay and 0.748 for discretionary operating. There are no changes in either one of those. I believe capital outlay, you could so choose to decrease it, but you could not increase it. So you'll notice that our RLE is lower this year when compared to last year, which is on line 9. But it's higher, you've heard the song and dance for 2 years in a row now, but it's higher than line 14, which is the rollback rate. So we have to advertise for a tax increase. So the rollback rate is the rate that would generate the same amount of property tax revenues as approved for the prior year. When the tax base increases like this year, the rollback rate is less than the prior year's rate. That just means tax values have increased, so we're receiving more in local taxes when compared to last year, but the local tax rate did not increase. But we still have to advertise a notice of tax increase, which is what you're looking at here. Which I believe is the next page in your handout. So it is important to remember that expenditures that are being planned are based on revenue forecasts and not money that we have in the bank. So if COVID continues to disrupt the economy as it has, the forecasts are less likely to accurately describe our future reality. This is why the budget numbers do change regularly, and why the budget, we like to remind everybody, is a process. It's not just a document. We still face a mid-year budget cut in two ways. So proration and reduced FTE or enrollment. So proration is when the state reduces our budget to keep the state budget balanced, which is in the Constitution. So it's not necessarily because we have a reduction in enrollment. It's probably because other districts have such an increase that they've exceeded that budget line. So they pay out the increase, then come back with a categorical and reduce it as a proration. Another way we could lose funding is if we do see a dip in our FTE between what we forecasted. We forecasted pretty flat with last year, so we're hoping we do see a bump. But again, that also makes me nervous because we could see an increase in FTE, which is great, but we won't get the funding for it because the proration comes and washes out any growth. But we still need all of those expenditures to go along with increased student population. So does anybody have any, and again, we'll know that with the third calculation. So that's kind of when it shows itself, is that third calculation, which occurs in January. So we'll go through the ads and I'll get your approval for those. But first, do you have any questions about anything that we talked about? Okay, so I showed you the first ad. This is the first ad that I'll be asking you to approve tonight, which again is the notice of proposed tax increase. The second ad is the budget summary. And those are the items that we talked about in your little snapshots. That should matches the overall budget. So this is what we post on our website. This is what the public sees. All right, and then finally, the final ad to approve. Oh, let me say one thing now. So in your handout, you're going to see like a 3-page narrative. This is just a narrative of this. It also goes on our website, just helps people kind of understand what they're looking at, where this funding is coming from, the growth, the numbers. And it talks a little bit about our budget process and the SESP. All right, so the final ad we'll approve is the ad for capital outlay, the 1.5 mil. All right. Does anybody have any questions about any of those items?
I'll make a motion to approve all of them at once for advertising. And I know that when we all get a lot of questions, and no matter how many times you go through it, it's always very difficult to explain. And I understand it, but I always have to refer back to you for questions because it is hard to explain to the general public while we're, advertising for an increase every time. But it is necessary. So.
A second.
So we have a motion before us to approve the advertisement as follows: notice of proposed tax increase as well as notice of tax capital outlay and the budget summary ad. Is there any discussion or questions?
I just have one question, Ken, about just the total state and funding decrease of about 500,000. How do you see that, just big picture, affecting us? Like, what are your concerns where that's going to?
Currently in this budget, it's impacting the fund balance.
Okay.
Okay, the only other way to be frank, is either cutting a project that hasn't gotten underway, so a software we have,
Right.
we were gonna bring on that's budgeted, but we aren't gonna. And to be blunt, you usually would cover that in your salary line. As you see, it's 80% of our salary. It's usually tied to a decrease in FTE, so logic tells you that's the line you
Right.
hit. The problem that we have is nothing's logical anymore. If we have a bump in student population, we don't want those teachers to go anywhere. So in discussing with the superintendent, it's just gonna, if that's what happens, you're gonna see that, and it's projected in that fund balance as a reduction of that fund balance.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Slake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now call on Dr. Hall and Mr. Gore. Looks like Gore's first up the bat.
Yeah, good morning. I think the reason why we got a big crowd today is because they seen I was speaking. Mr. Aswell.
That's the whole reason I'm here, is I saw that.
Yeah, so nobody
Good door.
showed up, but it's
Good
okay.
door.
All right, so we'll roll with it. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about youth mental health, the plan and projected, budget. We talked about, Ms. Lake talked about COVID and how it's affected the budget. It's affected youth mental health. Having to take PD days, because of the beginning of the year when we had to do that. And, so that hurt with some trainings and getting people trained. So that affected our training plan. The great thing about it is the state knows about it, and it's affected in every single district in the state of Florida. So everybody's got the same problem we have. We're about 40% employees trained because of that. The goal is 50%. State does not expect us to make up that loss from this past year in 1 year. So we kind of work with that on a plan there, and you can see that through 2024. How we train, we're going to go back to the face-to-face, having those PD days, being able to, we've added this past year, we added 3 trainers, myself being one of those 3. And so that will help out some. Obviously, we gained 3, we ended up losing 2 through different avenues that were already trainers. So we're constantly working on replacing those trainers throughout school. That helps us in the district to train those staff members at their home campus. We do offer a little bit of online training this past year, though. We were able to do that for some recertification to a couple of different schools, and that was successful. So we'll probably continue to do some of that as well. Any questions about the plan for the upcoming year?
Is that online, the Cognito that's here?
Yes, ma'am, down there. So basically that's set up until it offers some support and staff members until they can go through the youth mental health first aid training.
Okay,
And that's completely free.
I see that.
Yes, ma'am. So if no questions with the plan, I'll move on to the budget part of it. Yes, ma'am.
How long is the training?
It's 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours. So it takes your day. So that's generally when we set up a training. Say Ben, for example, Hawkins is a trainer. Dee was a trainer. She moved to Yankeetown. They generally set up the training for the day with their staff, and it's a all day training.
Yeah.
Once every 3 years.
Which was it was a reduction from 8 hours. Is that correct? Dr.
That's
Hoffman?
correct.
That is
Yes.
correct.
Is
Yes.
that a week?
Used to be 8 hours, now 6.5.
Same material, same presentation, 2 less hours. We moved into it less than 8 hours.
Yes. Moving on to the projected budget there. That's projected budget, and the great thing about this past year with the training we use mental health for trainers, to train trainers, you'll see there on item 3, is we were able to do it 3 days online. So those are some costs in the projected budget that may not be there, but we're gonna add them just in case they get away from, the online training. But, I completed my training, and the other 2 trainers this year did theirs completely online. We didn't have to go to Tallahassee like they've done in the past for 3 days and that kind of thing. Again, there in item 4, Ms. Boyle, it talks about how Cognito is completely free to the district there.
Yes.
Any questions about the proposed budget? Everybody good? Okay, any questions at all for me with you, mental health? And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just say I think it's worth every dollar, just especially coming off the COVID year with all of the mental health issues. We've gone from safety to COVID and health concerns, and now my number one concern is back to safety, especially after these kids have been home, with COVID issues and.
And not getting off youth mental health, but safety and security, which ties into youth mental health.
Yeah.
Last week I was able to attend the conference, the school safety specialist down in Orlando, and that was talked about a lot because there's other districts that hadn't been to school in 18 months face to face.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a huge concern, is the mental health and kind of settling in. And there's some other statistics that I could share with you, but it's alarming. It's very important.
And now for the finale. No. I'm gonna pass this out, just speak to that briefly. Many of the board members have seen this flow chart. You remember 3 years ago when this all came into place, that we were to have money allocated to every district in the state of Florida. The governor signed that bill, that statute, and he stayed committed to his commitment. On page 2, I won't read that to you, just talks about the purpose of the mental health training that Adam just shared with all of us, as well as the youth mental health allocation plan, which I'm going to speak to briefly today. But I'll stop along the way in case you have questions. I'm certainly here to answer. So if you fast forward to page 6, you have a handout of the plan that we will be submitting. If you approve it today, we'll be submitting it this afternoon. It's due August the 1st. And I will share with you, there will probably be some tweaking to be done because the state changed the format. Ms. Boyles, the first 2 years of our plan, they gave us the components and they allowed each district in the state to enter their information and not in a standard format as it is today. And so the standard format, there's some glitches, there's some tweaking to be done. So they've already apprised us that there'll be some tweaking that we will have to revisit. And that's fine, just fine. So what you see on page 6 are the assurances. This was not in place the first year, the second year is in place now. And it's in place now because the state has received some feedback from community members, et cetera, that there are some things that districts may not be doing. I will assure you that these assurances, and at the bottom it speaks to the school board policy and procedures. Many, if not all of these things have been in place, but I am going to bring to your attention some things that we need to put in writing. It's been our way of work in our schools with our SROs, law enforcement, if you will, but they want it in writing, and that's fine. We'll have a procedure in place. That's not an issue at all. So the flow chart that you have, which is the flow chart that we created 2 years ago. See, we were already ahead of the game in Levy County. Woo-hoo, yes, we were. So I just changed the year, right? Because we have those things in place. And what we had in place, you'll see that first bullet under the school board policy or procedures has been established, is that once a student is referred for mental health screening, they have to be assessed within 15 calendar days. That's in our flow chart. We already had that 2 years ago. And then they also want to make sure that our community-based providers, if a child is referred to them, they have 30 days for referral and also to begin to provide services to our students. Now, what I want to bring to your attention are those last two bullets. So we have to have a process in place in writing regarding if a student, a school resource officer or school safety officer who has completed the mental health crisis training. Many of our staff, our safety specialists have received training. And if our SROs have not received the training, they will need to receive the training as well. And that it talks about the mental health crisis intervention training and verbal de-escalation. So what they want to see the state is that we're not automatically Baker acting students, and we don't. We consult with a school counselor, a mental health clinician. We reach out to the mobile response team that's provided free of charge to our districts through Meridian Behavioral Health Care. So we don't make the determination on whether or not the behavior has escalated to a point, but there are times when that behavior may be detrimental to that student or to others, and we have to make a decision about safety. But our officers, our SROs, do not just haphazardly decide that Johnny needs to be Baker Act. We go through the process, but they want to make sure that we're looking at interventions. Are they in place? So Baker Act is always our last resort, that's my point. But they want us to put in writing a process that we provide to our schools. That last bullet, I've already alluded to that, consulting with mental health professionals who have the credentials and skills to determine if a child's behavior has risen to that level. So those are the two areas we will put in place. We won't have a policy, we'll just have written procedures. Part of this plan, they ask us to identify one or two measurable outcomes that we will work on as a district. It does not mean that we only have one or two goals that we're working on. We're just going to report the ones that we're going to measure, and we're going to report to the state. Now, you probably know this already, but in Levy County, you tell us one or two, we're overachievers, so I chose 3. But we have other goals that we're going to work on in our district for sure. That first goal is 70% of our students identified in need of mental health and behavioral services will show a 75% improvement. And how do we know that they've improved? Is that we're going to look at the discipline referrals. We're going to examine threat to themselves or others. We're already capturing that information, Mr. Gore and I, on a monthly basis from our schools. So that's how we're going to know if what we're doing is working for our kids. Our goal 2 is 100% of our parents, 100% of our parents will continue to receive information, awareness, resources to support their children. We've always provided that to students, but now, to parents. We're putting in writing, we're going to continue to do so because we know that that collaboration between parents and schools is equally important. We can do all that we can do at the school level. We want the parents to support what we're doing, and in turn, we're going to support the efforts of the parents as well. And then the last goal is 70% of our students who are administered what's called the SABRS, Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavior Risk Screener. That's new to us. We have never used a universal screener. There are some districts in the state of Florida that do. Many do not, but we do have a document, a screening tool that we've used for several years that Dr. Pratt, our school licensed psychologist, have shared with us. But we're going to purchase one this year to identify social and emotional difficulties for students. And again, we're using the 75% of a decrease in those behaviors that students may be exhibiting. fast forward to page 9. So we've identified our 3 goals. And now this is where the work comes in. I won't read all of this to you. I'm just going to highlight a few things. So PBIS, all of our schools, with the exception of 2, are certified PBIS schools. Our other 2 schools are exercising those same expectations. For example, school-wide plan, school-wide consequences, school-wide rules and procedures are already in place. That's part of PBIS. So we're not doing anything different because PBIS includes those tiers. You've heard of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the MTSS process. Tier 1 is what every student receives on a campus. Tier 2 is something a little more that Sally may need to help that student, whether it be academic or behavior. And that's usually small group counseling. Tier 3 is individual counseling for students. You're seeing them more frequently because the data suggests that the student needs more support. And this is all data-driven. It's all data-driven. So that's one of our goals. EBP stands for Evidence-Based Programs. You used to hear a lot about research-based programs, and it has its place. But I'm all about, and my colleagues are, we want to see practice. We want to see that it works. You can research all day long, and there's a lot of value in that, but is it working in schools for kids? So the state has been very clear. We're looking at evidence-based programs. They gave us a plethora of options to choose from, or we could choose our own. That second column talks about how we're going to implement the plan. And I want to highlight that, you know, we hired a liaison, a family liaison specialist. And she, from Bronson Middle High School, is going to be working with all of our schools throughout the district, bringing the families into schools, bridging that gap if there's a gap that exists. She's going to be our resource to the school as a whole, as a district as a whole. And so in saying that, part of that dissemination of materials will probably filter through, I can say her name correct, Sean Myers is on board. She's part of my team now, and we're just so delighted to have her.
That's great.
She's bubbly, she's very approachable. It's a win-win for students, families, and our district as a whole. So that's the implementation part. And again, I don't need to repeat that last column. The outcome measures, I've shared that previously when I identified the first 3 goals. And then the state wanted to know, in each of these plans, where does it fall for MTSS? So for PBIS, it covers all 3 levels, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And that's what you're going to see throughout the document. If you turn to page 10, talked about Sabers, that screening tool that we're going to be using. It includes a screener for the student to do a self-reflection. And that's essential for students to share with us where they see where they need assistance. It's one thing for an adult to come and say, Sally, you need this, this, and this. And Sally say, no, I do not. But if Sally identifies those areas of need and concern, we need to take that into consideration. There's a screening tool for teachers as well. It's all online. It's very quick, and it really shows, first you want to see if there's some similarities, what the teacher is seeing, what the student is thinking that he or she may need. That's going to be the driving tool that's going to drive what kind of intervention and counseling services the student's going to receive. Question? Yes?
The screening, is there professional development that needs to go with that, or?
Yes, Dr. Pratt, our licensed school psychologist, will be providing training on the screener.
And you're screening when a student shows, if you know,
If a
student
teacher,
shows
when you look at the flow chart,
characteristics
if a
of certain
teacher or
things.
a parent,
Mhm.
because a parent can also contact the school and say, I think something may be going on with my child.
Okay.
That's our red flag.
Mhm.
The screener takes place.
Takes place at the teacher level.
Teacher and the student There's a student component and a teacher component.
Okay.
That's where we get the ball going. And sometimes teachers more so, because kids are in their classrooms, they start seeing some things that's just not quite right. And we don't know what's not quite right until we screen and then come up with a plan that's individualized for that student.
Can the teacher screen prior to contacting the parent?
Yes, but in terms of providing services, we have to have parent permission.
Okay.
Because if we were only screening a small population of students, then we would have to get permission from the parent because not every student is receiving that opportunity. But parent permission does come into play when providing services.
Yes.
So moving forward, the last is a curriculum that one could use, and when I say one could use, our school counselors, because our school counselors are critical. And it's really important to remember that the mental health allocation funds that's given to us, that we're not allowed to supplant, which means that the contracted services that we've contracted with, you've seen those contracts come before you, those clinicians cannot come in and do the work that our school counselors are to be providing, services that they're to be providing. So with that in place, this curriculum, because I will share with you that our turnover in terms of school counselors the last couple of years have not been great, but we have a couple of schools that have brand new counselors. We want to support them. They don't have the credentials just yet to be a board, if you will, certified school counselor. So they're in their learning stages and they come with very little experience in this area. So if they have a program, a curriculum, if you will, that they could use to work with students, we're moving in the right direction. We want to support them. We don't want them to be frustrated because they don't know what they don't know. This is one of the programs that we've selected to use. It's free. Again, the state has supported, this is one of many that we can use. It's called the Cognitive Behavioral Intervention for Trauma in Schools, known as CBITS. There's always an acronym. School-based can be group, individualized intervention. Again, it's evidence-based, so there's data to show that it does work. And it's always about if we implement with fidelity. So if it says you do 1 hour and you do 30 minutes, the data's not gonna look very great. This research has already been done to say it's gonna take this amount of time, over time, to see a change. You see at the bottom of that first column that this curriculum encompasses 10 group sessions over time, 1 to 3 individual sessions. These are with students, of course. Then there's a parent component. We're going to offer that to our parents. They can decline, and we will document that. We're going to offer some training, some professional development, if you will, for our parents as well. The second column, who will be involved? Our behavior specialists can administer and use this curriculum, our social worker, our mental health clinicians. I failed to include our school counselors, but they can too as well if they go through the training. And believe it or not, this morning, I was talking to Mr. Coward about this yesterday, but this morning I received an email from a friend, another colleague, where this training, because there's a lot of districts in the state of Florida that's going to use this curriculum, is going to come to us online. There's several days to choose, a 2-day training, free of charge. So I'll make sure I gather our staff that's going to be involved in this process training. There's one thing I failed to share. I'm looking at my notes here. And you all know I have to have notes because if I don't, we'll be here to 5. We'll be here to 5. She asked me to stay on track. When you go back to page 10, you will note in that second column, I remember Dr. Pratt and I talked about this, that we're going to pilot the SABRS screening tool. So we're going to get 6th graders, incoming 6th graders, and 9th graders. That tend to be the population, not always, it tends to be the population where those kiddos just need some more support. Those hormones are kicking in. They don't know if they're coming or going, and there's some behaviors that's totally inappropriate. So that's what we're going to target, so to speak, identify, and work through the screening tool with them first, instead of investing district-wide. And I have a couple of schools that have volunteered. I have others that I'm giving them an opportunity. If we find that we have more principals who would like to pilot it as well, we can certainly do that. We thought we'll start small. And then next year, or maybe half the year, we decide this is going great. Maybe we want to indulge all grade levels. We want it to be manageable, and we want to do it well. And we're not familiar with this tool, so it just makes sense that we pilot it first. Make sure I tell you that. Okay, so any questions thus far?
Which schools are piloting?
Okay, so right now we're looking at Williston Middle High School and Yankeetown. Haven't had an opportunity to talk to all of our principals and go into great detail about what this looks like and what commitment they would have to make, but it would certainly be open to other schools as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're on page 13. Don't be alarmed by the student to counselor ratio or the student to social worker ratio or the school psychologist, because we're not alone. This is an issue, a problem, an area of concern nationwide. I think we all know that. And I remember a few years ago, the state of Florida had proposed a bill to require a lower student to counselor ratio. But with that, you have to provide funds to hire people to provide the service, right? So they quickly decided we can't make that a law because we have no money to give school districts, and so how are they going to pay for personnel? But currently, you see our school counselor ratio 1 to 550, and that's an average. I took the last FTE data to come up with my ratio. School social worker, we only have one. We've only had one for about 3 years now. We've always had 2. They're hard to find. Everyone's looking for a school social worker, and believe it or not, they want to be paid and paid well. I've had some contracted school social workers with us for a couple of years, and they moved on to other places. So the data is what it is. School social worker, you see that having one. I just did outside of the community that she's going to be working mostly with our school social worker is Williston, although as I said before, we have our parent liaison that we've hired who's going to be also working. She's not a school social worker, but there are components of her role that will help alleviate some of the burden on our school social worker. So we're trying to level the playing field. Our school psychologist, I only use the Williston numbers because Dr. Pratt is only providing services in that community. Of course, the numbers would be 1 to 5,200, whatever our total student population is. So that reflects the Williston community because she's only in that one community. And then other licensed mental health provider, I indicated not applicable because we do not have any other school board employees, if you will, under the licensed mental health provider. Right below that, the state has asked us to describe our policy, roles, and responsibilities. So in that first bullet there, it says to explain how direct employment of school-based mental health services will reduce staff to student ratio. So the state wants to know, do we have a plan? They know that the numbers are high. We know that the numbers are high. Is it going to change? Well, my comment, and you see it there, is that direct employment of school-based mental health services providers will reduce staff to students ratio as a result of additional staff hired to provide needed support to our students. And so when I say that, I'm thinking of contracted services to work alongside our school counselors, like our mental health clinicians. More people you have available, they can provide support to level as best we can that high student to counselor ratio. Does that make sense? Okay. The second, describe your district's established policies and procedures to increase the amount of time student services personnel can provide services. We're talking about our school counselors. We're talking about school board employees. You see my response. We're going to provide mental health services. We're going to review the current role of the responsibilities, and I didn't say school council, but that's what they're referring to in terms of school board employees, and we're going to make adjustments accordingly. We certainly would love to have our school counselors devoted all day, every day, providing services to students. That's our goal. Is it realistic? It's not.
Not until they give us money to do so.
There's a lot of responsibilities on school campuses and not enough people to fulfill those roles. And so we just do the best that we can. Mr. Coward and others and myself have had conversations, individual conversations, sharing with our principals that, this is our expectation. While at the same time, we know we have these other things that we have to take care of. Like testing. I look over and it's tucked away. Like testing, that has to be done. We can't put that on the back shelf. And it takes people, hands, to organize that for their schools. But there has to be a balance somewhere. And then the last is describe our role of school-based mental health providers and how we're going to partner with them. So we partner with them by reviewing students' data, having conversation, collaborating, disseminating information to families. That's what we do. We do that collectively, whether you're a contracted person in our district or your school board. We're in it for the long haul, and we're in it to support students. So that's a given. We do that anyway. But again, the state wants to see that in writing, that we have a plan moving forward. At the bottom of page 13, I've listed our contractors. You're familiar with them. It's come across your desk to approve. It's outlined here. Kim Carpenter Herring has been wonderful to work with. We're going into our second year. The state wanted us not just to say counseling services. They want to know if it was telehealth or face-to-face. So I've indicated that. And I would tell you that Meridian on the second page, page 14, I've listed them as well. We have a contract with them. In the past, they've been able to deliver face-to-face. COVID came, and last year, it was very difficult, impossible to hire, except for one, from Meridian that was willing to come on campuses. Everything was telehealth. That's the way of work. But a lot of our families and a lot of our students just need that personal touch. That face-to-face, old-fashioned, you sit with me, you sit beside me, we work together. And then, of course, we have the community action team that comes to our IEP meetings, they come to our any meeting, because remember, this mental health is about every child on every campus. IEP, 504, it doesn't matter. Every kid matters. So this is applicable to every kid. And so the community action team is part of that team effort and looking at the whole child and also including the families. And I will tell you that our experience thus far has been, we haven't had a family to deny services of the community action team, but sometimes they refuse services if the community action team that includes the Meridian staff that represents the CAT and school staff, when we start talking about maybe providing services to families, sometimes families are not open to that. And we have to honor their requests, but we also understand that impedes sometimes the progress their child can make, right? Because we want to do what we do at school. We want it to carry over into the home. We want the parent to continue to support what we're doing. And likewise, we support what the parent is doing. So when we get to a point, we haven't had very many, but we've had a couple of families say, no. We can do this at school, but you can't come to my home. And we can't force, we're not going to force that issue. We're going to talk about the benefits of looking at the whole family, the child, the parent. But sometimes parents are very adamant about that. I just want you to be aware. So if you get a call, you know that we've done our due diligence, but we can't force their hand. Page 15, money. We have a little bit more money than you, Mr. Gore.
Just a tad bit.
Just a tad bit, darling.
Tad bit.
Okay. So in essence, the state wants to know, how much money did we have left over from the previous year? $160,000. And I oversee this budget, and Mr. Gore oversees his budget for the training component. But this year, as you see, they combined the plan to be one. And so I've outlined how we're using that money. I would say to you that the majority, you're not going to be surprised as you see it here, the majority of our funds are used for services, salaries, for people to come and work alongside us to support our kids. So that's the bulk of our money. And then they wanted to give us a narrative, you see it there, travel, some dollars set aside for travel, assessments, estimations, stipends for teachers to attend trainings, and then some office supplies. So not a whole lot is spent in that area. The bulk of it is always salaries. As Ms. Kim talked about in her budget, I was thinking, she said 83% or so.
That includes.
Yeah. In an IDA budget, it's about 83% of our budget is paid for people to come and work and support our kids. I'm going to stop there and entertain any questions that you may have, any concerns that you may have. And let me just tell you, this is a plan that's going to be submitted to the state, but it doesn't mean that we have to only do what we have here in writing. We're going to do much more. And we're going to do much more because the student data is going to dictate how much more we need to do. And we have the funds to do it. Questions, comments?
It will be nice to see when you start gathering all that data, that maybe we can see where they started and where they are now after implementing the screening and so forth. That would be interesting to see.
Yes, we will share that data. No names, we will share the data.
Correct.
But I do want to share, Mr. Gore, we have been collecting data for several years by school. Every month, there's a Google sheet. The counselor, the mental health clinician, the administrator goes in every month and they determine how many students have been referred for services, how many students have been Baker acted on their campus. So we've been collecting that data from the very beginning, but this component about the screening, we will collect that as well.
Yes, we can.
Because we have to report that data to the state every year.
Correct.
Really to prove, if you will, verify that we are providing services and not just looking at numbers, but we want to see the results. And that's why you have that last column about the implementation and all that, yes. Okay. So the last thing I want to share with you is that I'm very happy to share with you this year, for the first time in 3 years, that we are ready to roll. We have clinicians in all our schools. In previous years, we've had to wait. We couldn't find people. We're working diligently trying to find mental health clinicians that come and work. We are covered. Now, I'm going to say this as a caveat. I am still looking for at least one more full-time clinician for a community school because they need someone to be on campus at least 4 out of 5 days because they have a new counselor. Actually, we have 2 schools that have new counselors. Chief and L has a brand new counselor coming to us, and Joyce Bullock has a brand new counselor. And neither one of them have their credentials just yet. So we want to provide as much support to those 2 campuses because they need that level of support. And I'm hoping we can find one more counselor and maybe share that person between the 2 schools. Or if the data shows that we need more boots on the ground, if you will, people, then we can go as high as 2 more for sure. But I'm happy to know that our schools, and they have not been told this yet, that on the first day, they will have a counselor and or behavior specialist, or what we call a registered behavior technician, which is right below one that's working toward their board certified behavior analyst. They have to be supervised by someone that has those credentials. So we have people that's working on the behavior side and then people that are working on the mental health side. And together it makes a very awesome team. So that's good news. I hope we can keep them and they stay committed throughout the year. Of course, we have no say in that, but we would treat them well and hopefully give them a manageable caseload. Because last year at some of our schools, the caseload was very high. It was not manageable. And that's why we have to really support our school counselors because they have a place in this process. Page 16 is where the superintendent will sign off if he agrees and the board is in agreement with the plan that's going to be submitted to the state. Fast forward to the last few pages, you'll see where our charter schools, Nature Coast, and Whispering Winds continue to be a part of our plan because all the charter schools in the state of Florida can write their own plan. They don't have to fall under our plan. But our charter schools, we have a great relationship with them. We really do. And so they have appreciated our team taking the lead on this. And so you have the signature either of their board president or they've given the authority of the school-based administrator to sign off on, and these will be uploaded to Department of Ed as well. So that concludes my presentation of sharing what we're doing, why we're doing it. We're held accountable. I love that. We will always rise to the occasion, without a doubt. Superintendent and board, can I make a motion? Okay. I'm going
A lot of people try though.
Just take it away, Chairman.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Hall or Mr. Gore? Not, I'll entertain a motion to approve this presentation.
I make the motion to approve the plans.
A second.
No, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
Dr.
you
Hall.
very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hall.
Thank you, Dr. Hall and Mr. Gore.
I ain't thinking Gore.
Good job.
All right. Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Chair, if you'll see, we're requesting approval to advertise. So there's just a quick change on policy 3.09 due to a statutory change with the governor's signature. So that's changing the word may to shall on the moment of silence. So on a policy we already have. So this is permission, seeking permission to advertise.
All righty. Do I hear a motion to advertise this change?
Make the motion to advertise the policy on moment of silence.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Next, in years past, we've needed a legislative liaison to be designated for the board, and it's kind of morphed, and they've changed it from legislative to advocacy. So FSBA has reached out for you all to nominate somebody to be the advocacy liaison from our board.
Who did it last year? Is he not here?
He's, that would be, I believe it was me, so,
I thought it was Etheridge.
what is he? Actually, I think it was me, and then it fell to Miss Brookins, so, and then I think she's seeking to pass the torch to someone else, so.
All right. Well, we will accept the nomination for that position. Anybody want to step up and volunteer?
What exactly does it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what does it
Yeah.
entail? My hand
So-
raised for question.
Too late. That's, you will learn
Yeah.
on the job.
That was raising the hand. That was a school raising question.
Look here, BA, sometimes you better ask the question before you volunteer.
I need a bidder number.
This person represents us, like I said, in years past, it had been titled legislative. And so it would be involved with going and developing the legislative priorities for FSBA. Now they've changed it more of an advocacy. So they're using that role instead of just legislative. So it's the legislative is a smaller piece of it. It's more about just advocating for our students and our staffs and being a representative on a bigger pot of people statewide.
I nominate Tammy Boyle.
Sure, absolutely. I'll take it.
Well, since you have nominated Ms. Boyle and she has
Oh, I need a
volunteered to
second
take
though.
that position, there is no second on the nomination.
There's no second.
So we will forego the further nomination and voting process because Ms. Boyle has volunteered. Thank you, ma'am. We need an alternate, don't we? Do we need an alternate?
I don't think at this time we
At this time, we don't need an alternate, so good luck on that. You will do a great job. Thank you. We will now move on to our approval of the minutes from the last board meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read over those?
Yes.
I will entertain, and they are up to date, and I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to our consent agenda. We will start with Ms. Boyle. Do you have any questions, comments on the consent agenda?
No, sir, I've been through all my questions with Mr. Coward, and I am good.
Thanks. Mrs. Brookins?
Yep, I think all mine have been answered. I know we've got a lot of changes and, Ms. Hires, are we pretty much filled with all the schools and everything with everybody, with our teaching positions and
Well, I will
staff?
tell you that as of last night, we have 16 teaching positions open. There have been a couple of years in the past, we started with 24, 25.
Right,
All the principals, they're interviewing on weekends, at night, traveling, so they're working very hard. And I anticipate today 3 or 4 more coming in, so they are really hard.
right, I know, they're working hard on that.
Public schools are very close to being done.
Great, that's wonderful. Glad to hear. Thank you very much. All my questions have been answered.
No, mine have been answered too.
Oh, you're good. Ms.
Okay.
Kaminsky. The only thing I have on the consent agenda, well, I have 2 things on the consent agenda, and this is just recognizing some people. If we look at number 24, Yvonne Rogers. Yvonne Rogers a few years ago was recognized as being the aide of the year. What's the term for that? ESP for the year. And she's just a fantastic person and entering retirement. I hope she has a great retirement, but I am sure she will be missed in Cedar Key. Cedar Key is not my town, but Yvonne Rogers is very special to me. The other thing, if we'll go to our employee status changes, number 2, this is the only time this ever happened to me. I got a call from a Gilchrist County school board member thanking us for doing such a great job of getting that person the start that she needed in education. She's leaving us, and I wish her well, and I hate to see her go, but it's kind of strange to get a call saying, hey, y'all did a great job getting that ready for us. And I hope we curb that in the future. But other than that, that's all I have. Is there any further comments, questions on the consent agenda?
I make the motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. There is no further discussion. We'll now vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Superintendent.
I will be brief. We have 8 people right now from Levy County that are down attending the math new best standards to come back and bring that to our district to kind of be trained the trainers. That will be Ms. Hanlon, Ms. Ruiz from the district office, Mr. Gauss from Bronson Middle High School, Dr. Emily Hancock from Williston L, Ms. Stephanie Parks from Chiefland Middle High School, Ms. Jennifer Philman from Chiefland Middle High School, Mr. Jeff Webb from Cedar Key School, and Marlene Wiggins from Bronson Elementary. We did our best efforts to spread it out so we had representation. So unfortunately did not get somebody from Yankeetown. I tried to get somebody on the elementary side and they backed out at the last minute. But thankful for those 8 going down and going to bring that back to us. Had a text message from Dr. Hancock, not math related, but she said, thank you very much for pushing us forward to dive into K-12 ELA. She is hearing the horror stories of other districts representing how they're trying to train teachers on the standards that are going to be in place for this year and then new standards that will roll out in the following year, and how detrimental it will be to be trying to roll out English, language arts, and math all in the same year. So kudos to those 8 that are down there going to bring that information back to us. So other thing, Heather Rollins has had some ELA stuff with middle high school and with middle school one day, and high school another day. And then last week was K2 and 3-5 broken down. And Heather Rollins is really doing a good job for us as our coordinator of literacy and helping with our reading coaches. So kudos to her. And not to steal Miss Brookins' thunder, but I happened to pop into Chiefland L, and Chiefland L, Miss Megan Snyder was doing a Canvas training the other day for 12 teachers. So they were there. It's great when we see our teacher leaders rising up and sharing information and helping, because you had some veteran experienced teachers that have probably been in the classroom for an extreme long time, and they're trying to continue to put new skills into their repertoire to reach our students. So I appreciated that. So, and then the last two things, Miss Hogan was out. We're glad she's back here with us. So, but in her absence, Miss Sherry really stepped up and did double duty. So very thankful for Miss Sherry on what she brought to the table. So, and very appreciative. She had to step out because she had a kiddo had a doctor's appointment. Melissa Lewis continues to help lead in pushing out information and communicating. So just really, really appreciate what she brings to help the district. So thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. We'll now move to board comments. We'll start down here with Mr. Clemency.
For once, I don't have a lot, just getting ready for school. Like Ms. Brickens said, it was Ms. Hires. I know the principals are working so hard. I know Ms. Westfall's having lunch dates and working after hours and with you. So thank you so much, trying to get all those positions filled before school starts because it's coming up quick. So thank you.
Mr. Brickens?
I just, a lot of positive comments in the community that I've heard about, changes with administration and principals and the elementary, and sad that Kelly left the elementary, but great that she's, in our high school too. So, just a lot of good comments about changes that we're doing in our schools, and of course the fantastic construction that I keep talking about, but just the progress is just wow, wow, wow. It just goes by and you see the construction and it just looks like it's just been there forever, and the sod they did and paving, it's just unbelievable. So I know I go on and on about that, but you drive by and there's just changes every day, and it's just always been there. So it's so nice. It's all good. But thank you. That's all I have.
Cool. Mrs. Boyd?
Just with Cedar Key, summer school's winding down. I posted a few things on Facebook sharing what the kids have done with their science through the Achieve program. And next week coming up, they're having a big water slide. So that'll be fun to go down there. And one day I was kind of competitive with the kids playing ping pong. So they want to take me on again. But they're learning a lot. They're very excited. I think the teachers are excited as well. And that's really all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. The only thing I have is the Bronson Quarterback Club is sponsoring a golf tournament. So if we have any golfers that would like to have them a team or just participate in that, that's going to be on August the 7th at the Chiefland Golf and Country Club. They have that. That's a little annual event they do over there. And anybody's interested in participating, they'd love to have you. The other thing I would bring up now is anytime you are married to a type A personality and an overachiever, it's tough. And when you sit up here and you look at this is a bunch of overachievers. This is a bunch of type A personalities. And we're all married. And we know it takes a special person to be married to people like us because we give our time to others and we are pulled away oftentimes away from our family. So it takes a special person to support that. And today I want to bring it into the record that my friend is married to a very special person. My friend Chris Coward is a classic overachiever, but he married way above his abilities when he married Ashley. And today is Ashley Coward's birthday. And Mr. Coward has special romantic plans for her. We're going to take her to one of her favorite destinations for her birthday. But Ashley is one of those people, like we're all married to, that support their spouse totally. And she's a wonderful person. And on behalf of the school district of Levy County, we would like you to extend to her a very, very happy 27th birthday.
I will let her know. Thank you. Thank you.
And with it, Mr. Attorney, are we in trouble? Have we done anything wrong? Okay.
One more thing. Just because Brad's not here, Williston football team is having a state cook-off, July 31st. So she gets around
If
after
you
that.
wanted that brought up, he should have been. All right. Excellent. We all should have participated in all these things. No further business. Meeting adjourned.